I'll be very honest. I mean, the urban is something that I've begun to think about only very recently, and most of you have been working on this much longer than I have. Um, as an activist growing up in the 90s, the urban was not really our focus. Those of us who belong to a very radical left fringe of politics, we always believed that the village will encircle the city. He was wrong on that one, man. He was really, really wrong on that one. And it didn't. The village didn't encircle the cities for whatever reason. History turned out otherwise. There are no regrets about that. But it's just a reminder that it's the urban is a very interesting new phenomenon for many of us in the social sciences. We're looking back at several hundreds of years of social science focusing on the urban. So you might ask me, and rightly so, what is new about doing it today? I think my primary concern today is to try and talk about something called garbage and waste, and try and link it to the work that we're doing. So what are we going to do today? I think I have very limited things to do today. One is to review a new book. The second is to discuss our own issues around waste and garbage. And the third is to actually figure out how, and this will be something we'll do together, I hope, figure out how we can find an interface between advocacy groups, researchers, and local media, like all of us sitting here, and look at issues of urban inequalities, look at who are on top, who are at the bottom. I remember being, being a little conflicted about where our institute is located. Tata Institute of Social Sciences is located in Diporbil. We like to say we're on the fringes, but actually not. We are on Diporbil. We've just built up the place. We are in a very vulnerable ecological place. We share that place with a railway line, with a garbage dump, with Radisson, with the Assam Engineering College, with a host of other people, including a lot of people who probably, quote unquote, have settled there illegally. I'm very fascinated by this term as a sociologist. How does our presence there become legal and somebody else's presence become illegal? Is it because they have less power? Or if you look at Dibrugarh University, near which you have a gas cracker plant. Anyone from Dibrugarh? You have a gas cracker plant. I remember as a child, Dibrugarh's Sesa River used to be the source of amazing fish. No longer so. Nobody is going to eat fish from the Sesa anymore because it's polluted. The gas cracker plant, which we demanded, by the way, it was part of a collective effort to have development in Assam, and we said one of the outcomes of the Assam agitation was we demanded a gas cracker plant. It's a little bit weird, but we are weird that way. Next thing, we might want a nuclear waste dump just so that we can have a higher GDP in this country. But history will judge us. We will not judge ourselves. So you see, we did get the gas cracker plant. We did get a better university. We did get all of that. But we also, now friends at the university tell me that it's impossible for fishermen living along that Sesa River, which skirts the boundaries of the university, to earn a living. So they've paid a huge price for that. The second thing is how do we distribute fiscal resources, which means where does money go in for beautification, for drainage, which areas get a better deal. Clearly not where I was yesterday. I was stuck, but we demanded that again. It always fascinates me how we demand, how we are complicit in a way in our own problems. And the third thing is the idea of environmental justice. Looking at who enforces environmental laws, who are those who suffer the consequences of urban waste management. After all, this is a particular capitalist problem. The more we consume, the more we waste. But usually, it always ends up that those who consume the least end up being the most affected part of it. And this is something I'm sure you have discussed over the last few days. Definitions. These are the good ones to go with. Waste is unwanted or unsuitable material, substances or byproducts. Garbage is rubbish or waste, especially domestic refuse. Right? The key word here is domestic refuse. Can we change, please? There are two lovely ways to look at garbage, very striking. One is from San Francisco. You can almost see them modeling their garbage there. The other is from Manila. And it's a little bit more shabbier. I'm always struck nowadays by the way in which we we pretend that all urban areas have to somehow behave like the one on the left, right? We have to model everything. We have to model our cities. We have to model our garbage collection. We have to model everything in that sense. So the urban becomes a spectacle in which you are supposed to play out different possibilities where different projects can come in and help you out. I really like this. I got it off the internet, and it reminds me exactly of the kind of really hipster image that San Francisco seems to have, that even your garbage you can foreground against the background of a beautiful city, right? And Manila, of course, is something, I walk, I when I can, I walk from my house in Karguli to Uzan Bazar. And in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, everybody is collecting. The garbage collection truck comes in. It's pretty much a similar sight. We also have, in Hollywood movies, you see the garbage truck coming in, and then there's some Secret Service guy who's dumping something in. We have all of that. We have a garbage truck. It's filthy. It's nothing like the ones you see in Hollywood. We have the infrastructure, but it's crumbling. And maybe one of the things that we can do is discuss why it tends to crumble so. And we're going to discuss a new book. This is a very exciting new book. I urge you, Robin Jeffrey is a friend, but I'm not plugging his book just because he's a friend. But it's an amazing book. I think it's a very eclectic book. It's those of you who are expecting it to be coherent and following a logic. I think it's not. It's just the kind of book that you write when you come out of a workshop like this, where there's bits of everything. There's a lot of information. Asadoron is an anthropologist. He works mainly in India, and those of you who have read Robin Jeffrey, you'll know that he's someone who works mainly on the media, right? But this is an interesting book. It's called Waste of a Nation, and it is a clever pun on another book talking of nations by Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. It's a really clever pun, and I'm glad they came up with it. It was published just this year. It's done a few rounds so far. A few key points of the book are, if I may, one person's waste is another person's treasure. I've been binge watching this thing called Sacred Games on Netflix, and there's this character called Gaitonde, Ganesh Gaitonde. He's amazing, huh? So he says that. Actually, he uses the same lines. I think someone with a PhD with no job and lots of time was writing the script out there and probably had attended an urban meeting like this. But they were spot on. One person's waste is another person's treasure. The other key point that they make is that the wealthier the nation, the more per capita waste it generates. The interesting point is that countries with a high density of population like India, we offer many layers of how complicated waste management can be, how historically rooted we are in different ways of looking at waste itself. You cannot divorce waste from the issue of caste in India, and so. Look at disposal of waste without looking at caste in India. It's impossible. And the book not only talks about garbage that comes out of households, but it's looking at a wide variety of sources of where this garbage comes from. So they say, according to Asa Doron and Robin Jeffrey, waste is a national problem. It's tied to economic growth. It's how we as a country have decided to embark on a consumerist spree, where we have a middle class that wants to spend a lot, which thinks spending is really the way to guarantee a better life for ourselves, a better aspirational world for our children. And how do you balance that with needs of the environment? And this is a classic problem that people who've been doing urban studies over the last 50 years have constantly been reminding us, that it's not just about how you consume or how you beautify your city. It's, at the end of the day, how do you answer about who's getting how much of the environmental, pie. It's a public health issue. According to the authors of the book, they say that nobody wants to die from polluted water or smog. It's an even more pressing issue today, given the fact that every winter we have a nightmare, like a very apocalyptic situation in Delhi every year. It's our national capital, and it's amazing how, even anecdotally, uh, I've begun to realize that that whole H.G. Wells nightmare, that you can privatize everything, may actually be true to a certain extent, because I'm told, I don't know, I've never been to Delhi for the last few years in the winter, not because I don't want to, but because I teach. Um, but I've been told that there are certain houses, there are certain schools which can afford really expensive air purifiers. And these air purifiers are amazing. They can, you can literally, it's like a spa, you can go in and come out and feel good about yourself. Whereas everybody else is going to be breathing fumes. My neighbor upstairs from my flat is a young man who's just finished his MA at Ashoka University, and he still is very traumatized by the fact that they were breathing fumes. They could see the smog come into their classrooms, and then they had an amazing dust storm, which meant that everything, their computers, hair, bodies, uh, clothes, everything was full of dust. The air conditioning, well, even in paradise there's trouble then. So so it strikes me as amazing that we don't see it as yet as a public health issue. Maybe we do, but it's not really pronounced as a public health issue. And waste is closely entwined with the issue of natural resources in India. And this is really an important point that the authors are trying to make, when by all figures, um, more than 60% of our sewage is untreated and lands up in our rivers and in our water bodies. So they're trying to figure out what waste does. And there's a question they ask. Thanks. And this is the question: why is India so filthy? They begin with this question, and it's a very provocative one. Um, and they also, the moment they ask that, I think that they have images of boycotts and all of that, and they say, no, no, but it's not just India. The world was filthy. That's what the industrial revolution did. It made the world a filthy place before it made it cleaner for some, right? They were saying that in 1858, even Queen Victoria suffered a bout of typhoid, because the the Thames was yellow with waste and refuse, and it was really very polluted. And I have friends in London who tell me that they drink so much because it's a historical thing, because they couldn't afford clean water, so they would have to drink. Maybe it's true, I don't know, but it's a great excuse to start drinking early in the morning. They say that it was safer to drink beer and gin and everything else than to drink water, because even the rich were getting typhoid when they were drinking the water, the water from other sources. So, and so they, of course, they use that as a logic to explain everything else. Football hooliganism, everything. If you're drinking early in the morning, you want to fight, that kind of thing. But anyway, So the point that Asa Doron and Robin Jeffrey are trying to make, that Britain was completely helpless in its own, in the own mother country, and there's very little it could do, really, to help its imperial subjects like us. Um, and it took a lot of, and it took a lot of tragedies, human tragedies in Britain as well as in its colonies, for Britain to come up with certain policies. And the policies they came up with, uh, the authors argue, were actually very punitive. It was about quarantine, it was about setting people off, it was about demolitions. It's the kind of thing we do today. Right? Let's not get carried away by what happened in England in the 19th century. Our response, even today, to this kind of well, constantly. I live in Guwahati, and every time the Borolu floods, there's an eviction drive along its banks. And everybody, I mean, most middle class people think that that probably is a good way to go about it. But you can imagine these things are very, very unpopular. These things cause a lot of heartburn, and it's difficult to actually sustain them over time. So there's a need to come up with something more. So in real terms, what the authors are trying to say is that, I mean, I'm still with the book, okay? So I've not moved from here. That the average Indian waste less. So a big shout out for us. We are less. We create less waste around the world than the Americans, which we always knew. Um, they also, I mean, the book has interviews with the Prime Minister, okay, Mr. Modi, who positions himself as a defender of public order. So this idea that people peeing in public, that we have a dirty city, it really bothers our Prime Minister a lot. And it's a very interesting thing. I think it's a great middle class embarrassment in India that we waste publicly. We our garbage is literally our dirty linen is out there for everybody to see, and he epitomizes that spirit of middle class people feeling a little bit, uneasy about the fact that we defecate in the open and that we pee wherever we can, and men, and that our garbage is all over the place, right? And this is we cannot run away from that. This is really a very middle class guilt kind of thing. Why can't we be as good as our neighbor? And um, I think a note of caution here. One of the things that all these early philosophers of enlightenment have been teaching us, and we cannot run away from them either, is that we start getting less concerned about one another when we begin comparing ourselves to someone else. When we aspire to be like someone else, when we begin, oh, we have less money than the Singhs, and we have the Ghoshas have more cars than us. We become we empathize less with our neighbors then. So in that sense, this aspirational guilt that we have about garbage maybe sometimes prevents us from thinking about what we do with it, right? Um, if you disagree with me, I'm completely open to that, because even I'm not so sure about it myself. Like I said, I'm thinking this through with you. Um, and the final point that they make is that this waste scenario in India has a very deep historical, it's a very complicated and layered historical legacy, right? And we will probably discuss that at some point when we start talking about our municipalities later on today. So where is this stuff coming from? Thank you. This is a list that when I read through the book, this is a list I could come up with. And the moment you pitch it this way, it becomes a little, it becomes a little difficult to swallow. Partly because I have lived through the kind of decommissioning of mills and all of that in Delhi in the 1990s. And it was a huge civil rights issue. It was I mean, it was framed primarily as an environmental one by the courts and the builder lobby and the malls and everybody else who hadn't come in as yet. They thought that it was that these urban factories and mills were an eyesore, and they actually worked very well with with the judges and others to actually get rid of these so-called polluting industries from Delhi. So industry is one big source. Um, but as a civil rights issue, I'm still conflicted about that. What you do when you have a big industry, whose responsibility is it to clear it up? Can you just then displace hundreds and thousands of workers to a distant place? So these are issues I'm still grappling with. Homes, again, different homes turn out different kinds of garbage. We will discuss that in a bit. Hospitals, municipal markets, restaurants. Restaurant waste is another very interesting new area for social anthropologists. Uh, in the United States, especially, anthropologists have been working on the amount of waste that comes out of restaurants, creating a subculture of young people actually collecting the waste and living off of the waste, and actually living entirely out of waste that comes out of these restaurants. So, who is in charge of collecting the waste? And this is a screenshot from the Guwahati Municipal Corporation's website. It's it's something that's really interesting. I urge you to, if you have the time, just to look at it. It gives you a sense of um, a real sense of what's happening around our cities, right? Can I have the next one, please? It's the municipalities again now reliant on as many as 31 NGOs. This is a screenshot of just a few, and this is as professional as we can get in a town like Guwahati. You know, you have a website which is updated occasionally, and which actually tells you how how garbage is disposed, right? And one of the things that they're really kind of trying to get more people to get involved in is the idea of waste management. But I've been trying to figure out who these waste management companies are. Usually they are NGOs which are registered, and they have a fairly well established norm of collecting waste. I still haven't been able to figure out who finally collects the waste from my neighborhood. But I know this much, that the waste in Guwahati actually is outsourced to the municipality. Doesn't do it. There is a larger company based out of Hyderabad who do it, and this company is a subsidiary of a French company who are collecting waste, and they calculate it per person. So there's a constant tussle between the municipality and the NGOs on the number of households that they are supposed to collect from. The municipality has in its interest to keep it low, whereas the NGOs have it in their interest to keep it higher, because in the end, it is, the municipality will have to subsidize part of the cost of payment, right? So all of this, I think, should register on our radar. I think all of this, as researchers and as activists and reporters, people working with communities, we should be very concerned about this. What has happened in our cities, and this is true of Guwahati. You notice that on Sundays, Guwahati, one main street is cordoned off. There are nice, banners and buntings and lights, and you can walk down the city, and it's actually it's good. It's inconvenient to people who drive cars, but then I think people who drive cars should be inconvenienced every now and then. Um, uh, but there's something really imitative about the projects that Guwahati municipality, or at least the GMDA, the Guwahati Municipal Development Authority, takes on, right? Uh, these imitative things are like doing an urban festival, and it's fun, but at the same time you can sense that it's been done somewhere else before, and It's great fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do these festivals. Winters are wonderful in Guwahati. You have food festivals and all of that, but there is almost a sense that there is that it is it has been brought on from somewhere else. We're trying to adapt it to our own needs. And so I find it very interesting. For instance, the food festivals in Guwahati usually mean that there is a small army of women who make some amount of money over 3 months, right? That's 3 months is the time when you can have these food festivals, and these are women who've had to move to Guwahati because they've been displaced from places in Upper Assam because of erosion and other things, and they work. They've started NGOs which quickly give you ethnic meals and rice beer and all of that, but their main work actually happens in the other 7 or 8 months uh, when they try to do other things, and it's got nothing to do with food. It has got to do with self-help groups. It's also got to do with um, what they called what they some of them call the urban kind of you know helping the municipality in work that was earlier taken on by by the municipality itself, like organizing schools and daycare centers, these kinds of things. So it's really interesting how there's this kind of interface in the city. I know I'm digressing from waste, but I'm going to come back to it in a moment. Um, if you think of, and this is something that, despite my saying that I wouldn't bring up yesterday's trapped situation onto today, but there was something that was really striking, and I need to maybe share with you guys that stuff flows, right? And in the social sciences, it's almost become like a really interesting and great way to end a talk by saying, well, let's look at flows of commodities and flows of people and flows of this and flows of that. But even garbage flows, man. And we were stranded there, and then there was this deluge coming down, and a lot of it was garbage, and it flows. So if you just visually, the optics of garbage flowing should not blind us to the fact that it doesn't require this sudden rainfall to make you aware of how garbage impacts your life. In a way, you have to think about it all the time. How does this happen in our communities and elsewhere? Uh, just like to end here with a small anecdote, and which is about when I go out for my walk. Sorry, I'm bringing myself in as the fieldwork subject. When I go out for my work in the morning, it's a routine sight to see really lower middle class and people who have very modest means always cleaning the streets of Kharguli and Uzan Bazaar. Always cleaning. Early in the morning, they're cleaning the dust, knowing that it will come back. They're putting water. You know how they put water in front of the shops? They're doing all of that. And you will see that's the moment when richer people take their children out and they go to school and all of that. And you see garbage coming out of SUVs and other people cleaning the garbage. So it's an optic that reminds you of the great disparities of those who waste and those who clean.